You won't survive 2026, you will dominate it. There are two types of people in this world: those who absorb the rhythm, the expectations, the noise, and those who impose their own cadence upon everything they touch. The difference has nothing to do with luck, with inheritance, with talent, with timing. It has everything to do with a silent decision made early in the quiet of one's own interior. The decision to become someone solid, not spectacular, not celebrated. Not the kind of person who fills a room with volume or dominates a conversation with performance. Solid, the kind of solid that does not bend when the pressure arrives. The kind of solid that other people lean on without even realizing they are doing it. The kind that is built slowly in the dark, through choices that no one witnesses and no one applauds. Most people have never made that decision. They have made many others, decisions about comfort, about approval, about what is possible for someone like them. But they have never made the one that matters most. The decision to become the foundation instead of the structure. The decision to stop performing strength and start building it. The decision that separates those who talk about transformation from those who are quietly undergoing it. That transformation begins in 5 steps. Not shortcuts, not hacks, not systems that eliminate the difficulty. 5 real and demanding shifts in how you orient yourself to your own life and to the resistance that will never stop arriving. Stop waiting for an easier life. The world will not slow down for you. It never has. It never will. The distractions will always be there, more sophisticated, more seductive, more precisely engineered to capture your attention than the ones that existed the year before. The problems will always be there. The uncertainty will always be there. The voices that tell you this is not the right time, that the conditions are not favorable, that you need just a little more preparation before you can begin. Those voices will always be there too. If you are waiting for the perfect moment to begin, you will spend your entire life watching others move forward while you stand still, held in place not by any external force, but by a comfort that promises relief and delivers only delay. That comfort is the most dangerous thing in your life. Not because it feels bad. It doesn't. It feels reasonable. It feels responsible. It feels like wisdom. That is precisely what makes it lethal. Strong people do not search for ideal conditions. They have long since stopped expecting them. They have made peace with disorder, not because disorder is pleasant, but because they understand that the absence of ideal conditions is not a reason to wait. It is the permanent state of existence, and any philosophy of action that depends on those conditions being met is a philosophy that will never be acted upon. They learn to move forward in the middle of disorder, in the middle of uncertainty, in the middle of everything that was supposed to stop them. They do not ask the storm to calm before they sail. They learn to navigate while the wind is still howling, while the waves are still breaking against the hull, while every rational argument for waiting still has merit on paper. They sail anyway, and in doing so, they accumulate something that those who waited cannot manufacture retroactively, experience inside chaos. Most people spend years building the perfect plan and never execute a single day of it. They organize their notes. They refine their strategies. They update their vision boards with more precision and more detail. They read one more book that might clarify the missing piece. They attend one more seminar that might provide the final framework. And they still wake up in the same place 5 years later, more informed, more articulate about their goals, and no closer to them than they were the day they first decided to get serious. The preparation becomes a disguise for avoidance. This is the cruelest irony of the intelligent, thoughtful person, that the very cognitive sophistication that should accelerate their progress is weaponized by fear into an elaborate justification for paralysis. They are not lazy. They are terrified, and their intelligence has given the fear excellent cover. You are not here to be perfectly prepared. You are not here to eliminate all risk before you move. You are not here to understand every variable before you commit. You are here to move. And the moment you begin moving, imperfectly, messily, without full clarity, without full confidence, without the certainty you were waiting for, you have already separated yourself from the majority who are still waiting for permission that will never arrive. That gap you create right there, in that single act of imperfect motion, is an enormous advantage. It is not dramatic. It does not look impressive from the outside. From the outside, it looks like someone stumbling forward through uncertainty. But the gap is real, and it compounds. Because while others are still preparing, you are already learning. While they are still planning, you are already adjusting. While they are still building the courage to begin, you are already halfway through the first iteration. That gap only grows wider with time. And what begins as a modest difference in momentum becomes, over years, an uncrossable distance. You must build a discipline stronger than your emotions. You do not need to be motivated every day. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings are weather. They shift without warning and without your consent, responding to variables you cannot always identify or control. Some mornings the fire is there and you can barely contain it. Other mornings the silence is so complete that even the idea of action feels foreign. Neither state is a reliable foundation for a life built on results. What you need is discipline, the ability to move forward, even on the days when nothing inside you is pushing you to go. The ability to close the distance between intention and action without requiring emotional fuel to power the engine. This is a fundamentally different operating system from the one most people run on, and it is the one that actually produces lasting results. Because the world does not reward intention. It does not care about what you meant to do. It does not give credit for the plan you had before the resistance arrived. It does not keep a record of your almost efforts and your promising starts. The world rewards consistency, the repeated action, the unglamorous return to the work day after day, regardless of mood, regardless of how inspired you feel, regardless of whether the current chapter of your life feels significant or mundane. Most people quit the moment the desire disappears. They were working on something meaningful. They had momentum, they had direction, the results were beginning to arrive. The identity was beginning to shift. And then, one morning, they woke up without the fire. The excitement had faded. The novelty had worn off. The gap between where they were and where they wanted to be still felt enormous. And the energy that had initially made that gap feel conquerable was simply gone. So they stopped. And they told themselves they would come back to it when they felt ready again. When the motivation returned, when conditions improved, when life settled down enough to make space for the effort, they are still waiting. You must become someone different. You must learn to operate in the absence of feeling, to continue in the silence when no one is watching, when nothing feels exciting, when the energy is low and the doubt is loud and the results seem distant and the rational case for stopping is more compelling than it has ever been. That continuation is not brute force. It is not willpower grinding against resistance. It is something more refined than that. It is the expression of a self that has decided, at a deeper level than feeling, what it is committed to. That continuation is not weakness pushing through. That continuation is the actual building material of real inner strength. It is not a sign that you are struggling. It is proof that you are building something worth having, because nothing worth having comes in forms that never require you to show up when you don't feel like it. Every day you move without motivation is a brick laid in the foundation of a self that does not collapse under pressure. Not a brick of skill, not a brick of knowledge, a brick of character, a small, hard confirmation that you are the kind of person who does not need to be in the mood to honor his commitments. And the longer you do it, the more unshakable that foundation becomes, until one day you realize that the person who required external conditions to perform no longer exists. He was replaced gradually by someone who carries his conditions with him. Discipline is not punishment. It is not self-cruelty dressed in the language of improvement. It is the highest form of self-respect, the lived demonstration that you take your own words seriously. That when you tell yourself something matters, you act as if it matters, even when the feeling that initially made it feel important has temporarily left the room. A man who takes his own words seriously becomes, over time, a man the world cannot ignore. Not because he advertises his discipline, not because he performs it for others, but because the results of sustained, unglamorous consistency are eventually undeniable. And the inner stability that comes from knowing who you are when the conditions are difficult is a kind of power that no external circumstance can confiscate. The tree, you must act before you feel ready. Most people are waiting for the right moment. They have been waiting for it for years. They can describe it in detail. The moment when the circumstances align, when the clarity arrives, when the fear dissolves enough to make the first step feel safe. They are waiting with genuine patience, genuine hope, genuine belief that the right moment is approaching. But the right moment is a comfortable illusion. It is a story the mind tells itself to justify inaction without having to identify itself as avoidance. The calendar never aligns perfectly. The circumstances never become ideal. There is always one more thing to learn, one more resource to gather. One more reason to wait that arrives at precisely the right time to feel legitimate. Those who move forward understand a simple but radical truth. Action always precedes confidence. Always, without exception. In every domain, in every era, for every person who has ever built something real, action came first. Not the certainty, not the readiness, not the feeling of being prepared. The action, the imperfect, uncertain, terrifying first step taken in the full presence of doubt. You do not feel ready and then act. You act and readiness follows. The clarity you are waiting for does not come before the attempt. It comes inside the attempt, through the doing itself, through the encounter with real resistance and real feedback and the real texture of the thing you have been planning from a distance. This is something the unprepared mind refuses to believe, because believing it would eliminate the last excuse. And the last excuse is the only thing standing between the current self and the discomfort of genuine effort. Every difficult action you complete rewrites your internal identity. It does not just add a skill. It does not just add a data point. It deposits a new layer of capability into the architecture of who you understand yourself to be. A new understanding of what you can handle is installed quietly, without announcement. Your threshold for what feels hard rises. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. And what once paralyzed you becomes something you walk through without ceremony. The way you now walk through things that once terrified you at an earlier age, you become more stable, more resilient, more dangerous to mediocrity. Not because you became fearless, but because you trained yourself to move in the presence of fear. You learned that fear is not a stop sign. It is a signal that something real is at stake. And things with something real at stake are exactly the things worth doing. You acted when the comfort was not there. You showed up when the mood was not there. And slowly, invisibly, you became someone who cannot be stopped by circumstances alone, because your ability to act stopped being contingent on those circumstances cooperating. That version of you is not born from a single dramatic decision. It is not the product of one great moment of courage that changes everything. It's built one uncomfortable action at a time, in moments so ordinary that no one around you even notices what is happening. A conversation you had when you would rather have stayed silent. A task you completed when every reason to delay was available to you. A standard you held when lowering it would have been easier and undetectable. But something is happening. Something permanent. Something that will not be visible for months or years, and then, all at once, will be impossible to miss. You must forge a mental armor. This is where the Stoic mindset becomes not a philosophy to study, but a living, breathing architecture of the self. Worn every single day, shaped by every single difficulty, Refined by every encounter with the conditions that were supposed to break you, you learn to stop wasting energy on noise, on provocations designed to destabilize you, on comparisons that drain you without building you, the endless scrolling through other people's curated victories while your own life waits quietly at the door, accumulating the interest of your neglect, on the opinions of people who are not building anything, who have never built anything, and whose commentary on your construction is funded entirely by their own stagnation. This is not coldness. This is not indifference to human connection or the world around you. This is the deliberate conservation of something finite and irreplaceable: your attention, your emotional energy, your capacity for deep focus, directed away from what cannot serve you and toward what can. Marcus Aurelius, a man who ruled the most powerful empire the Western world had ever known, managed his rule while simultaneously contending with war on multiple frontiers, plague sweeping through the empire's cities, betrayal within his inner circle, and personal grief that never fully lifted. He did not wait for those conditions to improve before he performed his duties. He did not require peace before he thought clearly. He understood something that most people never learn, something that his meditations record with the plainness of a man who had tested it against reality and found it true. The obstacle is not a detour from the path. The obstacle is the path, not a metaphor, not a comfort offered to make difficulty more bearable. A structural fact about how growth works. Every difficulty that arrives in your life contains within it the exact resistance your character needs to become the next, stronger version of itself. The failed attempt teaches what success cannot teach, because success does not force the honest accounting of one's assumptions. The rejection sharpens the vision and removes what was sentimental, leaving what is true. The setback forces the recalibration that comfort would never demand, and that recalibration is where the real growth lives. Nothing is wasted on a man who understands how to use it. Failure becomes data. Betrayal becomes clarity about who belongs in the inner circle and who was never suited for it. Loss becomes the kind of perspective that no lecture can provide. Difficulty becomes the raw material from which character is smelted. When you stop treating hardship as something happening to you and start treating it as something happening for you, something your nature requires in order to reveal itself, your entire relationship with life changes. Adversity no longer drains you, it forges you. Pressure no longer breaks you, it shapes you. The way pressure shapes everything that becomes more valuable under it. Every difficulty becomes a furnace, and you become something harder, something more refined, something more essentially yourself, coming out the other side. Not unchanged, but changed in the right direction. Not softened by the fire, but clarified by it. Build that armor. Wear it not as isolation from the world, but as clarity within it. Not as emotional distance from the people and things that matter, but as unshakable calm in the middle of a world that profits from your chaos, that benefits from your reactivity, that depends on your distraction in order to extract your attention and sell it to the highest bidder. The man who has forged this armor is not cold. He is not removed. He is simply immune to the things that are designed to destabilize him. And that immunity is not a wall, it is a foundation. From it, he can engage fully, love deeply, work intensely, and remain through all of it himself. Become someone you can rely on. You want to move forward? Then stop negotiating with yourself. The negotiation is so subtle, you may not have noticed it operating. It does not announce itself. It does not feel like weakness in the moment. It feels like reason. It sounds like there is a better time for this. I have more important things to address first. I will do this tomorrow and be better rested for it. One exception does not define a pattern, but every exception does define a pattern. Every renegotiation sets the precedent for the next one. Every time you push back a simple action, a workout you committed to, a conversation you owe yourself, a task you agreed to complete, a standard you publicly or privately set, You are doing something more significant than skipping a single obligation. You are quietly training a version of yourself that becomes easier to slow down tomorrow. The renegotiation becomes a habit. The compromise becomes a personality. And one day you look up and realize that the person who keeps breaking promises to himself is you. Not an unusual circumstance, not a bad week, not an aberration, but a pattern that has been running for years with your consent. The inverse is equally true and far more powerful. The same compounding that erodes character also builds it. When the momentum runs in the other direction, every action completed without motivation deposits something into the identity you are building. Every commitment honored without applause, in the dark, with no one watching, when the easier choice was entirely available, installs something into the self that cannot be taken away. Not just skill, not just progress in the external, measurable sense. Identity, the lived experience of being someone who does what he said he would do. But sometimes, not when the conditions cooperate reliably, that identity becomes armor of its own. Because when the world pushes back, when the environment is unfavorable, when the results are delayed and the voices, internal and external, are arguing for a different course, you have something to stand on that cannot be argued away, a history of your own reliability. You know who you are in those moments because you have been him before, in harder moments, with fewer resources, and you did not break. That knowledge is not arrogance, it is evidence. And evidence, unlike motivation, does not expire. Motivation gives you the spark, but habit builds the life. Habit is what remains when motivation has long gone home, when the novelty has worn away, when the environment stops cooperating and the results stop arriving on schedule. Habit is the automated, embodied expression of a decision you made so consistently that it no longer requires a decision at all. Seneca pressed on a truth that has not aged a day across 2,000 years of human experience. It is not the easy life that forges a man. It is the life that resists. The life that demands something from you before it gives you anything back. The life that asks, at every significant threshold, what you are actually made of, and waits with complete indifference to your preferences, for the answer to be demonstrated rather than declared. And that resistance, the friction, the discomfort, the slowness, the difficulty, the seasons that seem to produce nothing, the efforts that seem to vanish without trace, is not your enemy. It is your filter. It is the mechanism by which existence separates those who were serious from those who were merely interested, those who intended to build something from those who wanted only the experience of having built it. It does not block the path. It reveals who is actually on it and who was standing nearby, confusing proximity with commitment, while others are searching for shortcuts, for hacks, for frameworks that eliminate the hard part while delivering the rewards. You are building something far rarer, far more durable, far more valuable in the only currency that ultimately matters: inner reliability. An unbreakable relationship with your own word. A self that does not require external conditions to justify its standards. That is not a productivity tool. That is a character. And character is the only asset that compounds without limit, that cannot be confiscated by circumstance. And that makes every other form of success, material, relational, creative, not just possible but sustainable. Do not seek to be impressive. Seek to be consistent. The impressive is noticed and forgotten. The consistent is the quiet force that reshapes everything it touches over time, until the reshaping is so complete that people cannot imagine the terrain before it. Do not seek to understand everything before you move. Seek to continue. Understanding arrives inside motion, not before it. The clarity that feels like a prerequisite is actually a reward that motion grants, and it cannot be claimed from a standing position. Do not seek to win quickly. Seek to become impossible to stop. The quick win produces a story. The unstoppable person produces a life. Because the real victory, the one no one sees coming, the one that cannot be faked or purchased or shortcut into existence, is becoming someone who keeps his commitments to himself, not sometimes, not when it is easy, not when the season is favorable and the results are visible and the validation is arriving on schedule. Consistently, in every season, in every mood, in every circumstance, in the moments that offer nothing in return for your effort and demand everything from your character. That person is rare. Not rare because the knowledge is inaccessible. The knowledge is everywhere, in every book, in every tradition that has ever taken seriously the question of how a human being ought to live. Rare because almost no one sustains the translation from knowledge into practice through the full gauntlet of daily resistance that actual life applies to every principle you hold. One day, you will look back and understand with complete clarity that it was not motivation that transformed you. It was not the peak experiences, the dramatic turning points, the moments that felt like revelation. It was repetition. The ordinary days that felt unremarkable while you were inside them. The invisible efforts that accumulated in the dark, adding to a total that was invisible until suddenly it was not. The decisions made when no one was watching and nothing was at stake except the slow, patient construction of the self you were choosing to become. The mornings when you got up anyway, when every reasonable argument for remaining where you were was available to you, and you chose motion instead. The evenings when you kept going anyway, when the day had already taken more than seemed fair, and you gave it something more. The weeks that felt like they were producing nothing, and you stayed anyway, because you had decided to be the kind of person who stays. And that decision mattered more in those moments than any visible result. And you will realize something simple, something that will feel obvious only in retrospect. The kind of obvious that can only be earned and not explained. You never needed an easier world. You never needed the conditions to improve before you could begin to become who you were capable of being. You needed to become stronger. You needed to become someone whose relationship to difficulty was not one of avoidance or endurance, but of use. Someone who knew how to take the friction and convert it into forward motion. Everything else was scenery. The noise was scenery. The setbacks were scenery. The doubts and the delays and the long stretches where nothing seemed to be happening were scenery. The real story was always happening at a level below the visible. In the quality of choices being made in unwitnessed moments, in the gap between the impulse to stop and the decision to continue, in the slow and unglamorous accumulation of a self that could not be easily moved. And while many were still searching for their path, still waiting for the sign, still looking for the version of life that would finally feel manageable, still hoping that the next development would be the one that made the effort feel worthwhile, you were already building your inner empire, brick by brick, day by day. In the dark, in the quiet, in the ordinary, in the unremarkable hours that the world will never see and history will never record, but that you will carry in your bones for the rest of your life as proof of what you chose when the choosing was hard and the reward was distant, and the only witness was the version of you that was still becoming, and that empire does not fall. Not because it was built from extraordinary material, but because it was built, because someone showed up, because when it mattered and when it was difficult and when no one was watching, you stayed.